So welcome everyone to this session called Supporting School Transitions. So we have two CDAs here who are going to take us through this reflection process and share some tips and ideas and offer you some really good reflective questions on how we can support school transitions. So we have Jennifer McNeil, who's from Western Quebec School Board, a CDA at PETES, and we have Annie Beauregard, who is a CDA at RSB at Seaway CLC. Is that correct, Annie? Yes.
That's right.
And so they each support, Jennifer supports one school, but she also has multiple roles working on other projects within the school and for the Ministry of Education in Early Childhood. And Annie supports, how many schools are you at, Annie, now? Five schools. So they are well positioned to talk about transitions throughout the course of a child's life through school. So take it away, Jennifer and Annie, and thank you so much for accepting to be presenters today.
Well, it's an honor that you asked us, Catherine, honestly. So thank you. I'm new to the role as CDA and happy to definitely be part of this team and to have the privilege of working with Annie on this project. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes. Yeah, so we see, yeah, you can hit perfect. We see the full presentation. Thank you.
And we're super thrilled that you joined us. I know that there were choices that you had for this portion of the conference. So we're thrilled to see that you joined us in large numbers. So our focus today really is on the idea of supporting school transitions. And we're going to look at what we've learned really from the preschool transition and how that can be applied to the several other transitions that take place in a child's life.
So we did want to help anchor this session. So we know that the Ministry of Education, as you've heard, has a revitalization plan, and they also have documentation on the transition. So this is, a very text-heavy slide, so we're not going to read the whole thing, but it does come from the revitalization plan for educational success, education beyond the pandemic. And the two or three areas that I wanted to bring your attention as we talk about equity in today's sessions is that students from schools in disadvantaged areas, we want to give them an equal opportunity to ensure that they're given a fair chance and an equal chance to succeed. So we heard a little bit about that this morning. Students with disabilities, social maladjustments, not so fond of that term, but let's keep going, or learning difficulties to ensure regular follow-up of their IEPs, individualized education plans, and to ensure an equal opportunity for Indigenous students to account that the language they most commonly use and to depend on their needs. If they're French or English, in the French system, English system, we know in a lot of CLC schools, sometimes they navigate from one system to the next. So that's just, it's there in the documentation. We'll link to all of this in the last slide. So when we look at the transitions themselves in the revitalization plan, they do focus on that. There was a consultation done with school professionals and administration, and they advised that close attention needs to be paid between the elementary school and the secondary school transition, so that students who are new to secondary school can continue their education under the best conditions. So what does that mean? We'll explore that a little bit more. Ensuring that students experience smooth transitions, especially between secondary school and higher education in whatever form that takes. So we're also going to have a look at that, transition outside of high school. And that there's been a lot of work done. They've worked with the CEGEPs and the universities to look at how they can support these transitions and create the best environments for success to continue on their education path. And I would argue, I've said this before, and I truly believe it, that a child or a young adult, whether they go into higher education or not, are still citizens of the world. So what are we doing to best prepare them for their life path, whether that's through school or directly into, being a citizen and working in the world? So our goals for today, Jennifer.
Okay, our focus is to ground us in the planning of this presentation. We decided to focus on why are transitions important? When do they happen? Because we understand now that they need to happen over time as opposed to like a one-shot deal. And how can CDAs and CLCs really play a role in supporting the various transitions that take place? So words carry meaning. Words are really important. And we wanted to start off by dissecting the word transition together with you to see what our common understanding is. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And in the chat, I'm going to put a link to a Mentimeter. And we're going to ask you to identify, using one or two words, what does the word transition mean to you? I'll go and share the screen as well. So once you click on the link that's placed in the chat, we ask you to put those words into the website. Does everyone see that? Thumbs up if you, perfect. And I'll go open the screen so we could look at our common responses together. Trying to do 10 things at once, so be patient. Share screen. So the words that are appearing on the screen are based on your contributions. Make it bigger.
Jennifer, if you hit present, yeah, you'll see it larger.
Oh. Sorry about that. So definitely the words that are coming through are words like change, evolution, experience, changing places, crossover.
Uncertainty.
Sorry, Annie, go ahead.
It's uncertainty. I like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Progress, growth.
Move towards.
Definitely adaptations, next
I
step.
love, yeah, crossover, which will link very well to our.
I love that words are still coming in. I'll give you guys 30 more seconds or so, and then we'll continue. Different routine.
Vulnerability.
Amazing.
Oh, someone wrote the word bridge. I love this. They're all on the same, they're reading our minds.
Well, there's so many connections as well with what Annie and I were just speaking, everyone, with regards to how our content and our presentation really links well to what Nancy Saltarelli spoke about this morning. So we hope that you also see those parallels. I see someone just wrote trust as well, definitely. You can keep on adding, and what we'll do is we'll make sure that we share this Wordle with you at the end of the presentation so that you can keep it hopefully to inspire ideas when it comes to looking at transitions in school. So I'll stop sharing. Thank you everyone for your participation with that. It's really nice when people are engaged. So definitely the words that you brought up are words that really help us to understand the impact of transition and the significance that this event plays in the lives of children. And if we look in the dictionary, what we saw is that really it is about a process or a period where you're changing from one state or condition to another. So leaving something familiar to something maybe a little bit less familiar. And in our lives, we all go through various transitions, right? I'm thinking of my own grandparents who lived in their family home for over 50 years. And my mom and her 9 siblings had to convince my grandfather and my grandmother that it was probably best for them at the age of 80 to sell their home and maybe move into a home for people who are semi-autonomous. And it wasn't an easy period because of that uncertainty that some of you mentioned. So it was a process that took time to really secure them in this decision and to share with them what they were going to experience. But at the end, and once the transition had been made, it was a decision that they did not regret. It allowed them to become social again and to have those relationships with people that they didn't necessarily have when they were more isolated in their home. So we can recognize a significant transition like that having an impact on an adult who has tremendous experience in their life. So we can only imagine what that would look like for a little one who, is leaving something that's very familiar to something definitely less familiar, where they have no background knowledge per se on that environment. So if we look at the term transition in relation to the first school transition, or in terms of school transitions as a whole, the ministry describes this as a tension between change and stability. So I won't read this whole text to you, but those words in bold are words that we want to draw your attention to, because we're looking at a passage, and one where it might elicit a certain imbalance or uncertainty, right? Again, like I said, going from something known to unknown. The other key word here we want to point out is the idea that it's gradual, and that we need to allow children and families the time to adjust to their new environment. And as members of the team and key partners in the first school transition, we have a responsibility to really try and reduce any of those discrepancies that might hinder a child's integration or inclusion into the new environment. So keeping that in mind, Annie, go ahead.
So I was happy to see that someone wrote bridge this was sort of the vision when we were talking about what this transition looked like, what image does it bring to mind? And the bridge sort of was that for us. So basically this transition bridge, as you can see, we're moving from the old normal to the new normal. So the transition means that we're changing, there's something happening. And as you can see, it's a suspended bridge. So it's not the easy, concrete, it doesn't move. So when you're moving through this, you might feel vulnerable. You might feel like, oh, is this going to hold me? Do I have everything I need before I start crossing? So I think our role is to help families, because it's a family moving, right? The transition doesn't just involve the child. There's a whole family with them. And how can we sort of help either reinforce the planks, add some planks, make sure there's no hole that people can fall through. So keeping this in mind and seeing that obviously, when you start on one side of the bridge, it'll take a while before you get to the other side. And everybody has their own pace too, right? Some people will try to get across really fast. Some people will be very cautious. And how can we sort of support in this moment, where people, I think, are more vulnerable. And that was also a word that came up. So with that keeping in mind, how can we build the safety net so that they don't fall through, right? If they don't have all the planks, how can we make sure that someone is there to help them? Or even like, if you could imagine someone reaching their hand out to help them across. I think that's what we want to create. I think that's where we want to see our families be, see the person on the other side saying, come on over, it's okay, we're going to do this. So I think this, if any, when you're doing any activity, is something that we need to keep in mind, and that it is a process. Like, and we can meet people halfway also on this bridge, right? So you're not alone. And I think it's to me, it was very powerful. And I think we had long discussions, Jennifer, about how this sort of like, it says it all, but you have to bring it to your communities and to help them see also that, it's okay to feel this vulnerability. It's normal. We all go through transition, changing jobs, starting a new job, all these things involve transition. So we live transition throughout our lives, And obviously, like Jennifer was saying, when you're a 4-year-old, things that are seeming really hard at that moment, when you're transitioning later on in life might not be, but then something else will be. And depending what life situation you are in also, all of these things affect how you will be able to and how successful your transition is. So I think that's what we wanted to make sure that people were seeing when we were talking about transition.
Annie, can I add something to
course.
that? Just to link to what Nancy was saying earlier as well. And I think it's a word that resonated during yesterday's session as well, that the practices that we put into place or the initiatives that we adopt need to be intentional. So when you think of adding planks onto this bridge, you need to make sure that they're balanced, right? You need to make sure that they fit properly, that they're the right length. So it's about catering your initiatives and your activities really to meet the needs of those that you're trying to help transition over. And I think, like Nancy said that so well this morning, and it just kind of like, it reminds us that we need to make sure that we're not responding to our needs, but rather the needs of those that we are serving.
That's right. It's their bridge, not ours, right? So how can we help them solidify or add to? So we need to ask them. So like I said, we are all vulnerable during the transitions. Doesn't matter what age we are. And no one wants to admit that they have a problem, need help, or are worried. I mean, that's just how we are, right? We all say, when someone asks you, how are you doing? We're all doing good, even though we're fine. We're all fine, right? So if you want someone to be able to let you know that they're not having an easy time, there needs to be a build of trust. So obviously that's where we come in, right? As the, and obviously trust doesn't, we know when we try to connect with families, it takes time, effort, collaboration, and a non-judgmental attitude, which is so important. I think meeting people where they are is a great way. And I think Nancy brought that up to this morning too, about how we sort of welcome people in, and how we see it. So Jennifer was saying when we were preparing this that, it's, why do we find it so important to know if a child can cut or use scissors when they're coming into pre-K or kindergartner? That's where they're supposed to learn about this. So maybe we need to relook at what our expectations are, and maybe it is about spending more time offering things where people can connect and build the relationship. So I think as CDAs, as with our partnerships with community organizations, we could do that. We could offer opportunities for families to meet in a maybe, if some families are having a hard time connecting with the school because they had less experiences that were not so good when they were children, then maybe we need to offer activities that are more playful and, have them rediscover what school can be all about. So I think the opportunities are there when transitions happen to create these events that can bring people together. I think that's their main goal. If you want the families to become partners with the school, you need to create events where they feel they are welcomed. I think, Jennifer, you had added this as a great way. Sometimes we see, and I guess I'll let you talk about it, but to me, this was very revealing about, what we see and what could be really happening in a person, right? Who has these feelings. So that's why we added this here.
And I think we often misinterpret emotions. Nancy mentioned that before. She's like, if a parent isn't at school, we automatically think, oh, it's because they don't care. But in the case of the, maybe a cultural reality is such that, not going to school demonstrates that you trust the team who is taking care of your child. So it's just being cognizant of how emotions have deeper meanings and deeper reasons. And that perhaps if you see someone who's distant, it might be because they feel vulnerable. They don't feel necessarily comfortable coming into the school situation. If you see a parent who feels angry, why is it that they feel angry? You know, what other emotion are they experiencing based on maybe a past experience that they've had with the school? So I find that this is just a deeper look at emotions, and it helps us to understand human behavior, especially when we're, you know, working with families that we don't know. Let's take the time to understand how they're feeling and why they're feeling that way. And we can share the link to this wheel at a later date. I feel that it even helps me working with students,
Yes.
looking at, you know, what am I seeing? What am I assuming versus what is really happening?
Yes, I think because we judge, but that's human nature, right? But when we have these tools, it sort of makes us want to go a little further and explore why, you know, what's going on. So like I said before, I think during transition is a great time and opportunity to offer different activities to bring in people. So right now, I know that with the pre-K, there's the whole volet parent that has come into play. So I think that's a great way to meet the families, to get involved, and also to engage the families. Because as you can see, a lot of people were asking about, you know, but it's hard when the students get to high school, the families don't seem to want to come to activities or whatever. But I think once again, we need to realize what's happening in the transition. Where are the opportunities that we can sort of help them solidify or make it easier? And I think that's where we want to ask people too, what do they think? Our audience, what do you think? What are different opportunities that you could offer in your schools or in your organizations to help support transition? So did we want to do yes?
You can feel free to put that in the chat. I know some of you have already been using the chat, and it's very helpful. So yeah, some opportunities. What already exists in your areas? You know, you've heard some wonderful examples. We have this beautiful visual of the bridge that many of you like. We'll share the link with that too. Yeah, Brian says educate and facilitate. Share network resources. And feel free to share from your own context. So some of you work with multiple schools, and so you have that kind of natural long view of the transition. Others might be working specifically in high school or just in elementary. So yeah, a space to meet and connect with other parents. Facilitate event where other parents and service providers can meet. Yeah. I've had beautiful examples of that in the network over the years with things like Community Wednesdays or community nights.
I think COVID has put a little damper on, you know, all of the things that we were able to offer. But I mean, we will get back to meeting people in person. But I think it's been, in a way, it's made us relook at how we can connect. And, you know, like somebody was mentioning doing like parent-teacher interviews. In some areas, parent-teacher interviews have, I mean, parents are available now if you offer this. So I think we need to keep thinking that, you know, it's great to be in person, but sometimes we might want to do hybrid activities where people can join in. You know, we have the technology now, at least we've learned to use it. It was there before, we just didn't use it, right? So, and you know, who says we can't offer or we can't record what we're doing and then people can see it later, right? We need to be able to think about, you know, if people aren't showing up, why? And we often, you know, sometimes we don't reflect on that. We just sort of say, oh, they don't show up. So we stopped trying at one point. And I don't think we should stop trying. We should change it up. And who knows, like, you know, we've discovered that some families will be, you know, some people are shy and they would rather do a conference or workshop online, you know, and it's easier at night because they don't have to get a babysitter. So all of these things, you know, and some people like it in person. So maybe we can offer both.
Yeah.
Let's be open to, you, like asking people what is best for them.
I love that. So just to mention for Jennifer was typing in, there's mentoring. And then Kim also says, help them get a better perspective on the school.
Yes.
Invite people who have made the transition to share the experiences.
Thank you, Brian. That is such a, it's such a help, right? And one of the things that, you know, in my high school is we have the older students meet the younger students so that they get a perspective of, you know, what is it like, you know, student to student talk, but then we can also get parents. It would something I haven't even thought, but it'd be great to get a parent who lived the experience of, you know, a great transition or not so great transition to talk to future parents.
I love, Annie, that you're getting ideas from your own presentation.
Yes, from my own presentation.
I love it. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. And you guys, Annie's going to share like this wonderful activity a little bit later on that she's doing for that specific transition. I can't wait for you to hear it.
So just to show that we're lifelong learners, right? We're lifelong learners. Of course, we can even learn from ourselves.
Oh, and yeah, one more thing from the chat. Athena says, mentioning that the invitation to an event is for all family members instead of parents only. I think that's such a great perspective. Absolutely. So many different family structures. And for those lucky enough to have a network of support
because it could be
in
a
their family
that shows
so
up,
important.
Right?
Yeah.
It could be a grandparent. It could be an aunt. I've seen, you know, someone send a neighbor was also like a caretaker. So everybody's welcome.
I love that as well. Little things matter. I want to add that because it's so true. It's the small things in life that make a difference, and parents notice those, you know, and families notice those small little attentions. And that's how we build connection.
And isn't it interesting, you guys, that everything listed, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to go and take a look again, but everything listed has to do with family engagement and involvement. It's not even about focusing on, you know, what the child needs, although that they're always at the center, but looking at equipping those who are more closely supporting that child to have everything they need and to build their capacity to, and sometimes it's not even a question of capacity, right? To build their trust in their own abilities to help support them through that. So we're all kind of coming at it in a very kind of global, enveloping way. I always do this, right? Because I really do feel like we come in to support with our hands and our palms surrounding the families.
So important. So we basically looked at the significant transitions, the one that we see in our schools. So obviously we have the home to daycare, which is something that we might not see as much, but obviously with the new pre-K, the daycare to our home to kindergarten or pre-K, right, is a big transition. And we know that there's something to do there with the volet parent, with how much is being invested in the importance of making sure that students coming in at the same level, or at least being, you know, not ready, but they have the chance to experience the same things. Also, one that is not necessarily as important, but not as important. They're all important, but maybe one that we don't often take more, like we're teachers we see the kindergarten to cycle 1 being one that is important too. Maybe not one, and I think maybe teachers need to maybe speak more. There are things that we can do to facilitate, because with the emphasis on play, which is so important in the pre-K and the kindergarten. The change to a cycle 1 could be quite dramatic, right? The whole sort of, this is where you sit down and learn, can be quite a challenge for some of the students. Obviously, we have the grade 6 to Sec 1, and then high school to vocational professional studies. Something that I work at an adult education, so I see the transition also at that point, and I think we need to start having conversations with the higher education, whether it's CEGEP, to see how we can facilitate also our students moving on, and the ones who are not also. I mean, we have beautiful, like there's SARCA officers in all of our school boards, and their mandate to sort of figure out what happens when the transition is not so good going on to higher education. So, and I think we also wanted to ask you, what other transitions that you see, or you've seen, or you think that are maybe not as SARCA, yes. Who's the SARCA? Yes. So maybe you can put in the chat, are there other transitions that you find that, you know, could be also
yeah, they're within your context.
Yeah.
You know, do you see any other transitions to happen? I know some people were talking about, yeah, from like
yes.
what they call junior high school to high school.
Yeah.
Moving to new areas, Tanya. Yes,
Oh.
absolutely. Especially when, yeah, go ahead.
My father was a police officer, an RCMP officer, so I moved from Prince Edward Island to Nova Scotia and a few places in both provinces, plus doing the different levels of schooling, elementary to junior high to high school, from French to English. So I had nothing to help me with those transitions. And I found it hard. I was lonely. There was never any effort to see how is she doing.
Yes. I think you're so right. I think, you know, if a child comes into the school and has moved out, like what can we provide also, you know, to these families? And then I saw Jane put the military families, because obviously I know in my area and in Brian's area, we do have military families, and I know that they have support on base. But how can we involve these people in our schools? Actually, today is Teal Day, and I think it's military, and they actually, the organization in St. Hubert asked if they could go visit the kids at Terry Fox School. So I mean, they want to talk about these things. There's people out there who can help us. You know, it's not just us CDAs. We need to involve everybody around this child, you know. So important to think about these other transitions. And I'd like to think, I know Karen's on here, but puberty, you know, just growing up. I mean, no, I'm thinking about, because Karen and I do workshops with parents, but this whole sort of like, you know, becoming an adolescent, boy, that's a big transition.
And for the parents too, right?
Becoming a parent is a big transition too.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So in the interest of time, I'll just say, let's move it forward. I know you guys, we had such fruitful conversations as like in the planning of these sessions, and I wish we can go over everything, but we'll need to kind of move forward. Thanks.
So obviously, right, a successful transition enables a sense of well-being and security in the new school environment, positive attitudes and emotion towards school and learning, a sense of confidence in their ability to do well in school, and an educational experience that fosters optimum development and the recognition of their abilities. So those are all things we can play a role in not only, you know, in helping parents also be able to give that to their children. So we all have an important role.
So what we wanted to spend the rest of the presentation doing right now is looking at what we've learned from the first school transition, which has really been a preoccupation of the ministry with the implementation of the new preschool program. So we wanted to take what we've learned from that experience and how can we apply it to all of those other transitions that we brought up just a little bit earlier, and what you also added to the plate. And it's beautiful because you're thinking really extended beyond the school to include transitions that a child faces in their family life and in their social life as well. So I think this information is relevant and pertinent to all of those different experiences. So first and foremost, what we've learned is that a transition is something that happens over time. It's not about a one-time deal where I'm saying, okay, I've done my kindergarten orientation, families have met the school, they're ready to come in September. What we've understood and research demonstrates that the transition must happen over time, really starting in August of the year before the child starts school, all the way till about November after the child has begun their schooling. And this really, the purpose of this is, yes, to be able to understand the needs of the family, but more importantly, it's about being able to create a connection with the family and allowing the family to feel connected to the school, whereby there's a sense of belonging. And it's key here that we're mentioning that it's not just about the child, but it's also about their family. So we're welcoming the entire cohort into the school and trying to prime attachment so that we build connections that will last throughout the child's educational experience. So based on that, we wanted to throw out the question and take maybe, one or two answers. Based on your experience and your context and potentially the transitions that you're supporting, what activities and or approaches could be put into place either in cycle 3 or in secondary 1 on a similar timeline? Would anyone like to share? If not, I'm going to go to Annie, who has such great ideas.
I think I saw some people typing, maybe, no?
You can also raise your hand and unmute if you want to voice it live. So thinking about that, the first school transition is very, like, it's been drawn out on a timeline, and that's reinforced. But what about that transition from elementary school to high school? What if we looked at that on the timeline? What would that look like?
And how could you build connections with your students and families? Even though they've been in the school system for 6 years, how can we further foster those relationships?
I think Katrina had her hand up.
Oh.
Yes, Katrina.
That it would start at the elementary level in terms of like how we discuss the like, for instance, in Laval, we have our junior and our senior school and our feeder schools, but it's I know that just from being a parent in the system and from discussing with other parents is very much on top of mind, like worries about the trajectory of their child. And so it really has to start at the elementary level in terms of understanding what it could look like. And then at the elementary level, you gain so much more independence and you're out in the world by yourself. Like you're all of a sudden on a public school bus and you're spending a lot more time without supervision. So it's like preparation for more independence at the elementary through to the junior years. And then it's a whole other can of worms at the senior years in terms of drug awareness, just other issues that are related to that stage of development at the senior level.
I love what you're bringing up, Katrina, because it's one of the things that I hear most about parents who have been, putting their child on a school bus, all through their elementary or driving them to daycare. And then one of their first worries is, how's he going to get to school, right? Or he has to take public transportation, never taken the bus without, so these are all things that we don't necessarily.
And do they have the skills? Like the worry, do they have the skills to interact with strangers, to make those like decisions of like, have I prepared them enough to make those right decisions, and to be out there in the world and not vulnerable.
So you see, there are a lot of worries, and those are not necessarily the students are worrying about that, but
No.
the parents are.
Mhm.
So Mary, you have your hand up.
Yeah, hi. Our school board does something that I really like. In grade 6, each of our elementary schools take a day to come and visit the high school. So it really helps them to see it in action, get used to a lot more bodies in a building than they're used to. So they do that. And as well, on the first day of school, it's usually a Wednesday in August, we have only the grade 7s come in, nobody else. So there's that first day of school, which is always scary. It's a slower transition. The next day, the grade 7s stay home and everybody else comes in. And then the following, usually it's the day after Labor Day, everybody comes in together. And I find it's a smoother transition. I really like that practice.
And you notice that's something that they do in kindergarten too, right? Half of the class
Yes.
comes in, and then, so it's a wonderful way to sort of bring that into high school.
Ease it in. Yeah.
Yeah.
And something else, it's sometimes it's not about doing something extra, but rather being inclusive. So if your high school is having a talent show or some kind of special event, inviting your grade 6 family so that they can experience that firsthand is a great way to create that sense of belonging. Right?
We do
So
that
it's
as
not-
well. Yeah.
You don't have to do things always where it's extra, because I know like everyone's plate is full, but how can we be more inclusive in including our future families?
I think
Annie,
that's
is there something you'd like
fantastic.
to add?
I think it's something also like in grade 5 and grade 6, you know, when the students are starting to decide where they want to go, you know, having also maybe I've had different activities where I would bring some of the high school students who were part of either leadership or whatever, visit the elementary school and do little activities at lunchtime, just so that they get to see. I know one of the fears that the students have is all of a sudden they get the high school and these Sec 5 students are huge, and you know, are they going to put me in, they still think, are they going to lock me up in my locker? These are still things. So basically making these kids, you know, there, and for them to ask questions. And it's a great way to also get your high school kids, you know, engaged and going back to their elementary school. That was always a win-win. I used to do that. So you have a little core, you bring them back, and then the teachers get to see how great these kids have turned out, you know. And I don't always bring the ones who were the, you know, the ones that were always sitting down in their chair. So it's nice to see the connection. So trying to get that to continue. And like Jennifer said, so important. Maybe you don't always have to go outside and think of all new things. You're probably already doing things. And how can you just, you know, invite more people or be more inclusive when you're thinking about hosting these. I see lots of hands up. Brian.
Hi, thanks for the presentation, everyone. Yeah, I was just thinking, you know, happy over time. You know, it's not just for the kid, but it's for the parents too, and the anxiety or the worry, especially, you know, like you were mentioning, if they've been walking or dropping their kid in elementary, and all of a sudden, you know, there's this, okay, your kids are independent now, they're going to high school, and it's a little bit of this culture, I find, of hands off and don't be as involved as parents. And
Yes.
so one thing, when my kids went to Heritage High School on the South Shore, not far from the Champlain Bridge, there's 1,750 kids. But what they did prior to COVID, they'd invite all the parents at certain times to come in with their grade 6 kids. We'd have a spaghetti dinner, different information workshops, and we go on a tour. So that was cool. And the other thing is, I remember there was some anxiety when our kids were leaving Royal Charles Elementary in St. Hubert to go to high school. So one of the things I remember, you know, telling the kids was, hey, all of you guys, there's like 18, 20 of you, for the first few weeks, meet at the cafeteria and all of you sit at the same table. That'll be your safety zone. You know each other, and then with time, you'll start to make new friendships because you're in different programs. And the other thing was technology. As a parent, being able to have a routine where my child could text me that I've arrived or I'm safe, or that as a parent made me feel a little more at ease. Thank you.
so important to hear the voices of parents, right? And Brian's talking as a dad right now. And I think that's where we need to go back to, is to also, how was our transition as, parents whose kids went into, and I think one of the things we need to realize also, it is this natural sort of like when students get to high school, we want them to be more independent, but we want to make it like over time. We don't want to just sort of shut the door. And I think it's important for high schools to realize that if we don't let the parents in, then that's where we lose the connection. We're so elementary schools are so much more open, but I mean, why can't the high school be just as open, and let the parents continue on? Because we know with attachment, and we know all of this is so important for the child also. I know they'll say they don't want their parents in the school, but they're lying. They love it when their parents show up at school, or so I think we need to think of that also and let the parents in. I know we have more hands.
We have more hands and we have a bit less than 15 minutes. So we'll go to Karen and then Lisa, but we'll try to be succinct. I'm so sorry, you guys. I'd rather just open this up for everyone to have a group discussion. But
I love the sharing.
I
So
know.
this is valuable.
You guys are nailing it though. I mean, this is so important, and thank you, because this is the conversation, to be having. And all I kind of want to say is the notion that it starts with us. If we normalize and open our spirits and minds and kind of just go like, transitions are difficult, let's support you. Everyone's a winner. Annie, you said win-win. Jennifer, you were talking about inviting, kids and parents to fun activities or something that takes the stress down as an intro. So then the rest of any process will be that much less charged, because parents, we kind of portray the stress levels and we can, feed into that. And that's not always helpful. It's never our intention. But how can we lower it before we move forward? I love all these ideas and I'm taking crazy notes. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Lisa?
Yeah, it'll be really short because Andy kind of said part of what I was going to say, but it's just realizing, it made me realize that we're doing so much with our lower level students, like getting the parents in when they're in pre-K and welcoming them in and everything. And when they get to high school, we're concentrating just on the kids, and we're doing transition with the kids. We're getting them to come into the high school for visits and stuff, but we're not inviting the parents. Why aren't we doing like in August what we did with our kindergarten students, and getting the parents to come in with the kids and visiting, yes, and having events and welcoming them in? And then we're wondering why our parents are less involved in high school at that point. Well, because we're not inviting them as much. We're just getting them in for report cards and things like that. So,
which is way too far in the school year, right? I think.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just making me realize that, we're doing it because we kind of think, oh, they're in high school now, but no, we need to be inviting them more and getting them more involved.
And if that's the one message people take away today,
yes,
like that's amazing.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes. Let's open the doors back up so the parents can feel welcome, right? And they can feel that they're part. So obviously that's what we want to create. We want to create the sense of belonging. So we need to get to know the family. So whether the kids are in Sec 1 or Sec 5, if you get them in Sec 1, you might create this relationship that will last until the student is in Sec 5. And creating opportunities doesn't, parent-child, child with the school parents, like it doesn't matter, but the whole family. And so important is, sometimes it doesn't have to be something about workshops. We have to walk away from thinking that we want to offer this stuff to make the parents like better. Like we don't want to look like the experts, right? I think the parents are the experts of their kids, and we need to ask them. We need to get the knowledge from them. They know, how their child learns better. And so I think creating opportunities where the parents can come in and then we can ask them. So a survey, but an in-person survey, where you give them a sheet of paper and they give it back to you. Because when you send it in an email, there's not that, they need to meet people. I think that's what obviously in person, but I mean, just to know someone and anything that's celebrating successes, gosh, is an opportunity to invite parents. And when they're in the school, then you sort of have them, they're a captive audience. Then you can ask them the questions. If we were to offer this, what would you like? What are you interested? What are the questions that you have? And you'd be surprised how much they want to be involved. Like, we just have to give the invitation, get them in.
Feed them and they will come.
Yes. Yes.
So to continue on, the second lesson that really resonated when we looked at the first school transition was the idea that we need to promote diversity and inclusion. And this is something that's going to take time. We're not, where we should be, but we need to be more intentional with the practices that we put into place and the approaches we take with our families. So it's the idea that we need to recognize and celebrate diversity, whether that be, race, culture, religion, exceptionalities, making everyone feel welcome and that they have something to contribute to the school environment. We want to make sure that we look at children from a developmental approach and not deficit-based, right? It's not about what the child can't do, but rather where is the child in his or her development and how can I help them, through scaffolding and through support, help them grow. And I think a really key message that resonates well is that it's not about the child being ready for school, but rather the school being ready to receive the child. This is really about making sure that kids feel that they're coming in and that they're accepted for who they are, and that those who are taking care of them will do so regardless of where they're at in their development. And I just wanted to add quickly as well that when we speak about diversity and inclusion, it's simple things like making sure that there's representation in the classroom. It's not just about taking out, storybooks written by Black authors during Black History Month, but making sure that that's out all year long and taught within, let's say you're doing a unit on strong, influential women, well, you'd present Rosa Parks within that context. Similarly, when you have intake forms, or placemats or tools you're giving to families, recognizing, and Nancy mentioned this earlier, that there are different types of family structures. Some parents are being raised by two dads, some parents are being raised by grandma. So to have tools that say mom and dad and on an intake form makes people already feel excluded even before they begin their education.
That's right. Maggie's saying it's truth and reconciliation is not only in September. So true. And I think one of the things I can say that for the high school is when I have a camp, we call it readiness camp. And basically one of the things we always make sure is the students who are the counselors come from every different, I don't want just the kids who do well in school, the kids who are already really involved. I want students that are going to represent everybody, not just the sporty kid, not just the smart kid, but also the ones who had a harder time. And I think when the students come in and they see, oh wow, I can relate to someone, who looks like me or who, has had the same challenges as me, it makes a big difference, right? And it's easier to connect at that point.
So this is everyone's 5-minute warning.
Okay, so we gotta go.
I know we didn't even scratch the surface of everything, but a lot of these, we're going to share the PowerPoint. There's a lot of this information.
And you can contact us, right? Yeah. I mean, I'm open to have all these conversations with every single one of you. Now we can do it on Zoom and we can see each other. So.
And we apologize that we overplanned. It just that we wanted to give place for the conversation. So thank you. Third point is that it is a collaborative process. And I think the point here we want for everyone to take home is that we need to make sure that we are developing relationships with our various stakeholders. So turning stakeholders into partners so that we can support our various families that are being welcomed into our schools. And CDAs are integral to the collaborative process because you really have strong community connections that allow you to help the school respond to the identified needs, right? So if you see that literacy is a challenge and maybe parents aren't necessarily reading to their children And we recognize that that is a huge successor of school success. And it's also something that helps with bonding and whatnot. You know, we as community development agents can reach out to our literacy councils or our literacy organizations to support our schools with that. We
and
can
also there's
Annie.
so many people in your community that you might have not thought of that could help you, you know, continue on. Just a quick something we had realized at the high school is one of our feeder schools was had the breakfast program. And then they were coming to high school and we didn't have a breakfast program. So we thought, how is it, you know, kids don't stop being hungry when they move into Sec 1, right? These are the same families. So we created this opportunity and we went out and we asked, you know, we need to feed these kids at high school too. So just this sort of what do they have in elementary school that we can transfer into high school so that it will also, you know, the needs don't change. You change buildings, you transition, but some of the basic needs are still, and there's a lot of different partnerships that, you know, people offering activities that maybe don't offer them at the high school kids. But if you say, hey, maybe that's a need, they could cater, you know, so just opening up the conversation with partners is important too.
And consider your school board professionals as partners as well. So if you're looking at maybe giving, you know, like workshops to parents or having people come in and animate activities, you know, your ed and comp services professionals are wonderful at that. And I guess here, what, you know, the message we want to highlight is that, you know, we invite you to ask your schools to be part of those transition committee meetings because you have so much insight and so much to bring to those conversations. This goes without saying, family is really at the core. And I think we've already addressed this. We're looking really not just about supporting the child, but also the family, because together, and it'll tie into the next point, that parents are partners.
Yes.
So we're really working with families to support their child's development, and there's no one better suited to speak to their child than his or her parent, right? So it's about working collaboratively with those who are in or who have care of the child to understand the child, what their needs are, and then to further support that child both in the home and at school.
And I think if we look at, I know at my school board, the CLCs are going to have a big part in the Volet Parent next year. So if you guys, you know, you can find out what your pre-Ks, the Volet Parent is a great way to be able to help. And then you meet the families. So I'm hoping that if we meet them and we include them in, you know, pre-K and we continue, then it'll be easier. So once they do get to high school, I know it's long-term, but I mean, change takes time. So, you know, get the families in early and then continue, you know, keep the relationship, the partnership alive. And then in high school, they'll still be there.
So I'm gonna take over here. As much as I'd love to have Jennifer and Annie continue, but we are gonna have to go into the closing session in a bit. But I did want to just remind everyone that we're gonna share this PowerPoint. There's a lot of amazing information, and everything that you do in the first transition to school. So even if you're not working in early childhood and you're working in high school, speak to your transition agents. So many of these, as we've seen, apply at the high school level. And what would happen if you applied some of these parental engagement and support strategies to the parents in high school? I also want to mention that you should reach out to Annie because she has a lot of information about great activities that happen at the adult education sector, which if you all have the interest in that, we can bring it up at a CDA corner, or we can create an entirely separate session looking at that transition beyond high school, because unfortunately we didn't get to that today. So thank you so much, Annie, Jennifer, and all the participants for being here, for asking good questions. I know there were some questions in the chat we couldn't get to, but again, as I said, we'll try to bring them up at a future event. Clearly, this is something that people want to talk about a little bit more. And we are 1 minute over, so let's head over to the closing session and see you all soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.